French champagne is celebrated for its excellence. Yes, welcome back, faithful podcast aficionados, to Silver Screen Cinema Classics, where we're tackling a true giant of cinema. Bigger than a planet-sized transforming robot and classier than a bottle of Paul Masson champagne, Orson Welles' iconic Citizen Kane. I hope everyone got that reference. If you didn't, just look up Orson Welles champagne commercial outtakes. You'll get it. So, yeah, I'm your host, Michael Wilson, but I am not alone. Joining me on this exploration of groundbreaking filmmaking and Hollywood legend are three very special guests. Firstly, swinging back to Cinema Classics for a rare non-simian review, it's our Sci-Fi Queen, Nita.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be back.
Yeah, not that long after our last review. You seem to be becoming a regular on both podcasts, but that's not a bad thing.
Right?
Awesome. So, yeah, ready to talk all things Citizen Kane?
Oh, yes, I have thoughts. Lots and lots of thoughts.
Oh, boy. Could be getting some hot takes there then. Yeah, and secondly, returning from our Arsenic and Old Lace review earlier in the year, it is classic film aficionado and a bloody good artist as well. John, welcome back, John.
Thank you. Hello. I had to pause my audio because that Paul Masson thing almost made me fall out of the chair.
I'm glad somebody got the reference there.
Oh my God, I almost died. I had to turn the mute on. So thank you for having me.
No problem, not at all. Anytime. And yeah, we're joined by another guest who is new to Cinema Classics, but you will have heard him if you listen to DK's Cult Classics. Please welcome Rob. Rob, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime, as I said, and welcome aboard. You're new to Cinema Classics, but you have done this before, so you're not a complete newbie. So yeah, before we unravel the mystery of Charles Foster Kane's life, then, we have a couple of things we need to do to start, just a little bit of housework, as it were. And the first thing is, because you are new to the podcast or to the Cinema Classics podcast, Rob, I always ask all of our new guests the big question, and apologies for putting you on the spot, but what is your favorite cinema classic? And by that, I define that basically as any film from the dawn of cinema to around 1979. So, yeah, good luck.
Oh, flipping that. You don't do things by halves, do you?
No.
This is going to be a very left field answer.
Cool.
And I'm not going to say Star Wars, despite being a Generation X type person. What I will say is actually Charlton Heston's Ben-Hur.
Oh, excellent choice. Yes.
It's one
Absolute
of those
classic,
you can stick on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing anything, you can sit there with a beer, some potato chip, whatever. Just let it absorb all over you. It's still, to me, a beautifully shot film, a lovely acted one. It's got action. It's got chariot chases. It's got, you name it, it's in there. And it's just a great film. And some of the after the chariot race, his best friend, who was Regent, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it, but I'd still say it's my favourite one. When he's lying there in pain because he's basically been run over by a load of horses all the time. That still gets me today because he genuinely looks like in pain. He looks as though it's like, right, we've run out of tomato ketchup. Can we just run some horses over you? Switch on the cameras and it'll be fun. That's how powerful that scene is to me. So
yeah,
I would go with that.
It's fantastic. Choice,
anything that is science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. if it's a sci-fi classic, I've probably mentioned it at some point on one of the podcasts anyway, because I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. So yeah, if I haven't, I'm sure it'll come up at some point. But yeah,
I'd say in terms of true sort of classic films, classic sort of American Hollywood big stuff. Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Ben-Hur, as we were saying, Rob, fantastic choice. The chariot race alone is just so epic. One of the best things. You'll never see something like it in the age of CGI and stuff nowadays. I think it's a bygone art. But yeah, cool. Before we, get into it then, fully and start analysing Citizen Kane. First of all, let me first say if I come off a little bit nervous, it's because I am. We're only just tackling possibly the biggest film of all time here. So I know I've done this a lot, this podcasting lark, but it feels a little intimidating tackling Citizen Kane. We'll do our best, though. And secondly, there's a lot to get through. So if it's a slightly longer episode, I do apologise. And hopefully we'll get through it all. So, yeah, we're going to begin, as we always do, by asking where you were when you first heard that legendary word Rosebud, and what did you think of Citizen Kane when you first watched it? And I'm going to go counterclockwise, I think. So I'll come to you first, John, and ask your first impressions of Citizen Kane.
I was in college and in film class. And it was the first film we watched in film class. For obvious reasons that we'll get into. And I had already been a huge film buff. So it's funny, I hadn't seen it. But again, this back in the day, if it wasn't on television and you couldn't just go get it at the video store, you hadn't seen it. You didn't see it. Yeah. So I knew of it, but I had never seen it. And it was black and white, and I was a teenager. And I didn't care.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But I saw it. I was blown away. I was so fortunate to have a great professor who really talked about the things that we're going to talk about today. Yeah. And so that, from that day on, I still, to this day, even though it's been knocked off the official list, I still consider it the best film ever made.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been knocked down to like number 2 from number 1. It hasn't been knocked off completely yet.
No, I know, but number 2. Yeah. So anyway, yes, that was my experience.
Cool. I'll jump in earlier than I was going to then and tell you, because I actually have the exact same experience. My first time watching this was at university here in the Newcastle area. I went to Northumbria University, and it wasn't the first film we watched, but it was one of the first. And like you, I was I didn't not like the film. I appreciated a lot of the kind of technical stuff, and I was gripped by the movie, but you get a new appreciation even when you're too young to really appreciate it. I think when you've got a professor that tells you all of the kind of, we're going to get into the techniques and stuff that every film borrowed from, whether they were from Citizen Kane or not, because a lot of people would contend they came from other sources, but it's just amazing the way it's put together and the kind of technical expertise. And I do remember being really affected by the overall personal story of the film, the big reveal about what Rosebud is and everything.
Yes.
And I mean, I wasn't super young. I was probably early 20s at university, but I did get an appreciation for an awful lot of like 40s and 50s black and white movies that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And definitely on that list. So similar experience.
Yes.
Excuse me. So we'll come to you then, Rob, next. And what did you think of Citizen Kane when you first saw it?
When I first saw it, I couldn't stand it. It's the honest answer. So, I was brought up probably like a couple of you in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. There wasn't that much on TV and stuff like that. We were probably one of the first people to have on the street a video recorder. Ooh. And my mother,
fancy.
Yeah, my mum recorded it. It was on one night, probably on BBC Two in the UK, and she would then watch it over it, and I'd be just like, can we not watch this? I want to watch Scooby-Doo. I want to watch anything. You only had one TV in the house and stuff like that. Never mind the video recorder as well. And it was the UK, so it was raining a lot, so I couldn't go out on bicycles or anything like that. The point that I got a vague appreciation for it, but I was a cocky git and a bit arrogant, was like you two guys. It wasn't at university. I went to college and did a night class in video studies. And it was the lecturer there, a guy called Roman Basu, who was doing his PhD in Citizen Kane. And basically we went through an entire term, so September through to December, just analyzing every single line, every single phrase, every frame, every and at the end of it, I just went, right, I get it. So I must have watched that film about 25 times because of it. But I do have an appreciation for it in terms of what it did and what it changed. So that's how I discovered it.
Yeah, I know it's not kind of, you would think it would be way more universally beloved given its kind of reputation, which I'll get into, but I know there are some people, including my my usual co-host, who are not as fond of this movie, which I don't fully understand myself, but
it's a technical masterpiece. That's what you've got to work on. You've got to work on it was created in 1941.
Yeah.
Right? Europe was at war. It was only really there for the Americans. But for it was one of those sort of quantum leaps in sort of cinema production.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Took all the latest, greatest ideas and all the rest and put it into one place, and it was like a 2-hour masterpiece from that point of view.
Definitely.
But everything else has obviously copied it. So when you look at it as the original, you kind of go, yeah, well, I've kind of seen it before, or I've seen that motion cam used before, and I've seen that technique before. It's like, yeah, but that's where it started from.
That's right.
That's where it came from.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I don't think personally you can either undercut the kind of the level of acting that's on display, because these were all kind of theatre actors that were mostly new to cinema, and I think they all do a great job. And just how compelling the kind of story is. Again, I'll get into it when we hit talking about the writing, who's responsible for it or why, but I think it's a really compelling story. And I think, as we were kind of vaguely discussing off air, the fact that it still resonates really powerfully and echoes in a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today in terms of, the American dream and people who can gain power and influence and want to get the love of the people, but don't want to give any themselves, kind of thing. It's eerily more relevant now, I think, than ever in a weird way. Yeah. Not to get into the super political areas just yet, but yeah, fair enough. So yeah, I'm biting my lip then, Nita, as we come across to you. What were your first impressions of Citizen Kane?
Okay, so unlike you guys, I might be the only Gen Xer here who has never seen this movie until I was asked to be on the podcast. And I said,
wow.
That is a movie I've always wanted to watch and never got around to it. And so I'm going to watch it. I'm going to be a part of this podcast and watch it. I didn't honestly know much about it other than it was considered a classic and that it was in the 40s, not much. So I really went in with no expectation. The acting was phenomenal. I didn't care for the movie much itself, but I think that for the time that the movie was made, it had a really big impact because of what the world was going through. And I think that it spoke to a lot of people. Yeah. And I think that's what made it a classic. I had a hard time watching this movie. I kept trying to stay awake. I really did not enjoy this movie in the sense of, this is such a great movie. And I love classics.
Yeah.
Absolutely love classics. But this one was not one that I really, had I known what I know now, I don't think that my life changed much watching this movie.
Wow.
It really didn't have any kind of big significance to me. I felt like this movie was trying to tell a story, trying to give a message. Was trying to tell like a story and give a message that it wasn't clear about it. Not 100%. Like it was afraid to say what it wanted to say. And I think it held back a lot. But again, in the times, it probably was super outspoken. For the time.
I mean, if you're not familiar with the film, you might get kind of a lot out of the kind of what I'm going to get into in terms of the behind the scenes stuff, because you probably don't know that it's infamously based around a real person. Who Charles Foster Kane was based on. There's been disputes about exactly how much it is, but most people tend to agree that it's based on William Randolph Hearst, who you say the film kind of pulled its punches and didn't say a lot. He hated the film. He had every mention of it banned from every one of his papers and refused to show it. And went after Orson Welles for this kind of character assassination that he sort of saw that this film was in regards to him. So it's kind of weird that you say, it didn't really give you a particularly firm thing, because certainly people at the time, and definitely the man who it's allegedly about, would disagree with you on that one.
Well, that's because they knew the information. I think that they knew it. I think that if you write a story and make a movie about someone that is, culturally popular today, we all will say, you know what, I heard about that, or I saw that. I watched it with no background information on it, and coming from that perspective,
you were not drawn in at all by his story at all.
A little bit. I mean, the acting was phenomenal. They did a great job. Joseph Cotton as Jedediah Leland. Wow.
Very good.
Classic handsome. I loved him. I think they did a great job. But the storyline itself, I'm not sure. Maybe if I watch it again, it will have a different perspective.
I think maybe after this, you might want to.
That's part of the reason.
And I'm completely open to that. I
have to jump in here because there's two things I have to say because I'm going nuts. One, let me just. I just want to, Michael. I just want to add just a little more texture to what you were saying. About Hearst being so upset. It's very interesting, actually. It wasn't so much that he was offended about what the movie was saying about him. What he was actually really upset about was what it said about his mistress.
Yes. I mean,
it's really important to understand. Marion Davies was Hearst's mistress for his whole life. Well, until he died. And she really is almost a copy in the film. She was this young woman who had some aspirations for acting and, fell for this very powerful man who then insisted on making her an actress and, created an alcoholic out of her. And so more than it being upset about what it said about him, he was much more upset about what it was saying about Marion Davies publicly.
Mm-hmm. And for any of our more delicate or younger viewers, you may want to not listen for a couple of minutes because I did find out in the course of researching this what the real life Rosebud was. Is that a story you're aware of?
Oh, yes. Well, yes. Oh, my God. Go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Supposedly, that was Hearst's nickname for his mistress's vagina, shall we say, private area.
Yep.
So...
That's right.
A film that revolved around the secret of Rosebud was never going to particularly be something that he would be thrilled about because that
does sound a bit private, and I think that if I were him, I'd probably be upset that someone put that out there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to divorce it from the context of the time, but I mean, it's kind of comparable. I'm trying to think of a similar example, and I suppose in a way it would be like, I've not seen the film, but like watching that film that was recently out, The Apprentice now. Because we know, we're living through somebody in that kind of power level.
And unveiling the curtain behind the curtain kind of thing.
Yeah,
is that what
exactly.
You're
yes.
Although that is way more explicitly, it would be kind of like if somebody made a film about, a differently named character, but we all secretly knew it was actually about, Donald Trump.
But how brilliant is that? How brilliant is that? How brilliant to use Rosebud as that, as the thing that he... Well, the only thing that, really mattered to him. And then, as you're Hearst watching that and you hear that it's public now about some little nickname, a sexual nickname.
Yes, I can see that.
He was pissed, but you know what? Good on the writers. And I say writers because...
Oh, yeah, I'll get into that.
I know you're going to get into that.
Oh, yes.
Mankiewicz versus Wells versus,
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole movie literally made just about that, Mank, with Gary Oldman, which...
I hated it.
I haven't seen it, but I was hoping it would be good, but now that you say that, that's a shame.
No, you should watch it. You should watch it. I think I need to rewatch it, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
I love the Mankiewicz's whole story. Anyway, the whole family is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Hollywood legend, of course. But yeah, hopefully, as I say, part of the reason I'm doing this is to see if people that don't necessarily love or respond to Citizen Kane may get a new appreciation, or at least see why some people do love it. If you still don't like it, obviously, we're not here to judge. That's fair enough. And like I said, I think it's we're now so far divorced from the reality of what it was saying and how it was saying it. But I do think personally, it still echoes really, like I said, eerily with real world events, more so now, I think, than it would have even 10 or 20 years ago, in ways that we kind of discussed off air and I'll probably get into a little bit later on. But certainly we're seeing somebody that, you know, arguably in the world wants to be loved and isn't prepared to give that love themselves and won't acknowledge any flaws and failures. And
right.
Yeah.
Gee, that sounds so familiar. Oh,
I'm not, see, I've thought about that connection before because it isn't, I think it's a too easy one for me. I think it's, to me, it's still Rupert Murdoch.
Yes.
Well, you know what?
I
think that's a better. Yeah.
It's not a Trump. It's not a Musk. It's not any of those. Right? It is a Murdoch. Yes. I will manipulate this. You will do as you are told.
Yes.
And also obviously with the whole in control of the news network, so to speak.
Yeah.
That certainly plays so much better. I had thought about Murdoch. Boy, that's really cool. I'm so glad you said that, Rob. Seriously, I had not even considered that. And boy,
I definitely thought of that as kind of, the thing is, as Kane was late dying, I was like, this is going to be kind of similar to what it's going to be like when Murdoch, who's quite an old man, passes away. But then I was like, the sad thing is not really, because he's got family, like sons that will just inherit the business.
Yeah, in that regard.
Just move on to the next generation. It's not going to be like, you know, Kane died alone with no heirs.
With no heirs. Yeah, exactly.
All of his belongings destroyed, and that was the end of his reign of terror, so to speak. Yeah. So it's kind of a sad indictment that in this world, you know,
the problem is when there are heirs that are going to take over your reign of terror.
Yeah,
that's where the real problem lies.
Well, and that's one of the, I guess, a triumph for the public in the version of this film, in that it's a tragedy, but it's also a triumph in that.
Oh yeah.
He won't be able. His story won't continue.
I was I was discussing this in regards to, you know, who does it kind of, because it does resonate. And again, apologies if you don't want us to get political and real world, but I think the allegories are there. And I do agree with you that it reeks of Rupert Murdoch, and it definitely did a few years ago. But I also don't think you can discount the Trump and Musk allegories, because you say, like, somebody that wants to manipulate public opinion.
No, it's the same. You know, that's the same dynamic. You're talking about somebody that has a major problem with, you know, narcissist, egoist, who has actually really no feelings to anything that does not relate exactly to him. He's a child.
Yeah.
He's a little child pouting. And it's the same, you know, in that regard.
But I do think, like I said, the modern day equivalent of kind of I'm buying up all these newspaper stations and radios would be I'm buying a social media site and you'll believe what I tell you to believe.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, it's
absolutely.
It's the whole pattern again. God,
that's
irritating.
Yeah.
And, just one last thing on that before we move on, because I don't want to bog completely down in it, but I did read that this is one of Donald Trump's favorite movies, and he watches it apparently several times a year.
Well, he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand
it.
I was just going to say that.
He sees this as this great man who got everything he ever wanted. That's what he sees.
Maybe on a conscious level. On a subconscious level, maybe there is something ticking at the back of his head about his father, about how he was taken away, and actually all he probably wanted to play with was Lego and stuff like that. Yeah. And actually his dad forced him into business because his brother wasn't up to the job, and da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, it's a little subtext there in the back of the old head. And
I would argue though that I think that's absolutely correct. I would argue that he doesn't recognize that part of himself.
Yeah.
I think that's probably very true.
I think there's a couple of moments in the film that kind of latched onto that I think he's, and I said this to you, I was discussing with DK when it kind of hit me when I was like, the moment that I talked about off air, when it's like, it looks like he's lost the election. And as we're his paper, we're switching the headline from Kane victorious to, well, I must have been fraud at the polls, which hit me like a ton of bricks, because I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what happened. And I was discussing it with DK because I had to take a minute and said this was really eerie. And I said, the worrying thing is that I read this as one of Trump's favorite movies, and I feel like he's taken it as a playbook instead of a cautionary tale.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
I think that's exactly right. Now that you've told me that, I didn't know that was a favorite of his, and now I see those connections, and that's scary too.
And that's terrifying. That is very terrifying, because I think you guys are right. He doesn't understand the true message. That absolute power corrupts absolutely. This man had way too much power and wanted too much control over things that he should have never had control over.
But also, you can't buy love. No matter how much you might want to pretend that you can alter that reality, if you haven't got the love to give, you can't just buy it from other people.
And that is another big theme of the film.
Yes.
Exactly, 100%. But there was another moment that reeked of that to me, and it was when, and it's such a small line, and it doesn't really dwell on it for very long, but it's when he's discussing with, is it Susan, his second wife, when she says, you've got no idea what it's like being up there, knowing that the entire audience just doesn't want you to be, and you feel absolutely terrible. And he says, that's when you've got to fight.
That's
and
right.
Like, oh boy, this is the Trump model, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's when you have to fight. That's when you have to fight all that much harder,
so weird.
And say what you will, positive or negatively about the character, but the you have to admire in some ways the absolute single-mindedness, not caring. You keep fighting, you keep going, you make it happen, even though the ends are not good for him. That idea is in some ways admirable. He's just not human enough to incorporate that to other parts of his life.
Definitely, and I'm not here litigating, politics, left versus right. I'm just talking about the actual life of a man who, likes this as one of their favorite films, and there's an eerie relevance there and an echoing and reflection of his life. So, that's my personal judgment. Yours may be different, and that's fair play to you. But I don't think, and again, we'll get into it probably at the end, because I don't think Kane is a particularly admirable man. I don't think the movie's message is, wow, look how great this guy was. It's a shame he died alone, but didn't he have a great life?
No.
Exactly.
No, it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's the complete opposite of that. I think it's more like, look at how a life led this way ends you up with absolutely nothing to show for it.
Exactly. Even the
you have physically, you have everything, emotionally, and anything that makes you a human, you have nothing.
Exactly.
And it's not worth it.
And that's the kind of message of Rosebud, isn't it? Is that at the end of the day, on your deathbed, the only thing you cared about was a sled you were playing with before all this happened to you.
That's right.
When you were a child.
literally moments before it happens.
Exactly.
You were happy and didn't know it.
Yeah, completely.
And now,
as well, there was also a moment that I completely missed that the first time I watched this, that I picked up on this time, and it's where he's it's like partway through the movie when he says he's going to relive his childhood and go and see his mum's belongings at a particularly low point, but then he doesn't end up going there, because I think that's when he meets Susan, and I was like, that's interesting. So he was kind of already yearning for that kind of that young boy with a sled when he was hitting a rough patch even then. So it's an interesting.
You know what? I think that's a really interesting point, because that's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about that. Because that means that, in that moment of feeling his humanity, he's going to go search for, the sled.
Yeah.
And instead meets her. And so it's in that moment, all of that emotion that he has not felt or repressed, instead of it, he suddenly funnels it then to her then.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
I think that's blatantly. I mean, I wouldn't say obvious because I'm not insulting you, but I think that's also when you realize, when you realize that, it brings a new kind of added kind of horror to like the way that he's manipulating her and kind of
and also manipulating himself with his emotion.
Yeah. But it's like she says at the end when she leaves him, it's, oh, I can't do this to you. It's all about the effect on you. It's you don't give a crap.
Oh, I can't do this to you. You're the one that this is happening to.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we're talking about the writing, which is a good thing, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because I did want to give a little bit of information. Then we can carry on talking about this. A film I could happily talk about for hours on end because, spoiler alert, I really like it. Sorry, Nita. I'm going to jump in anyway and give you some behind-the-scenes information about this movie. Again, there's quite a lot, and I have some as we hit on the different sections that we deal with, like writing, direction, etc. But I'll start with general behind-the-scenes stuff. So Citizen Kane is frequently cited, as we were saying, as the greatest film ever made. For 40 years, across 5 different polls in 1962, 72, 82, 92, and 2002, it stood at number 1 in the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound Decennial Poll of Critics. And it topped the American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Movies list in 1998 and its 2007 update. The film was nominated for Academy Awards in 9 categories, and it won for Best Writing, Original Screenplay by Mankiewicz and Wells. Although it wasn't popular at the time and was supposedly every one of its nominations as they were announced was being booed at the Oscar ceremony, I read, which is rough. Although there is arguments that could have been Hearst, trying to influence public opinion. Again, we're not here to litigate the reality of it all here, but decide that for yourself. Citizen Kane is praised for Greg Toland's cinematography, Robert Wise's editing, Bernard Herrmann's score, and its narrative structure, all of which have been considered innovative and precedent-setting. The film is commonly praised for its intricate plot, filled with flashbacks that shuffle the chronology of Kane's life, its extraordinary performances, its marvelous technical stunts, and its deep focus photography. Few, if any, of the technical effects are entirely original to Kane, but Orson Welles and his crew's masterly use of so many of them in one film has made Citizen Kane an influence on nearly everything that came after. Again, we kind of touched on that earlier. So yeah. The quasi-biographical film examines the life and legacy of Charles Foster Kane, played by Wells, who is a supposedly composite character based on American media barons William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, Chicago tycoons Samuel Insull and Harold McCormick, as well as aspects of the screenwriter's own lives. Though, as I said, I think genuinely accepted to be more about Hearst than anything else these days. Upon its release, Hearst prohibited, as I said, any mention of the film in his newspapers. And as far as Orson Welles goes, although it was unusual for an untried director, Welles was hugely popular off the back of his infamous War of the Worlds radio play. If you don't know the story about that, just to give you a very quick rundown, basically people put on the radio and thought we were actually being invaded by Martians. It was kind of the very first example of what you might call viral marketing type thing, like the Blair Witch Project did in the 90s and stuff. But, is this real? So, yeah, people were so impressed. Wells became a huge figure. And so he was given the freedom to develop his own story, to use his own cast and crew, and to have final cut privilege. Cecilia Ager, reviewing the film Citizen Kane in PM magazine, wrote, "Seeing it, it's as if you've never really seen a movie before," which I think is a beautiful way of summing that up. I
love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I said, it's not going to hit the same way as it would be if, we've got many, many decades of movies since, but in 1941, I think, when it came out, understandably hit very differently. So, yeah. As I said, that was the behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to jump into the writing and the plot because I do have some things to talk about here, which, oh boy, that's quite a lot to get through. So again, I do apologize, but it's stuff that I think is relevant. The first thing is a press statement that was issued by Orson Welles in January 1941, and he said, "I wished to make a motion picture which was not a narrative of action so much as an examination of character. For this, I desired a man of many sides and many aspects. It was my idea to show that 6 or more people could have as many widely divergent opinions concerning the nature of a single personality. There have been many motion pictures and novels rigorously obeying the formula of the success story. I wished to do something quite different. I wished to make a picture which might be called a failure story." Which, yeah, okay, I can see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
And as we were alluding to earlier, one of the long-standing controversies about Citizen Kane has been the authorship of the screenplay. Wells conceived the project with the screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz, who based the original outline on the life of William Randolph Hearst, who Mank knew socially and came to hate after being exiled from Hearst's circle. In February 1940, Wells supplied Mankiewicz with 300 pages of notes and put him under contract to write the first draft screenplay. Wells later explained, "I left him on his own finally because we'd started to waste too much time haggling. So after mutual agreements on storyline and character, Mank went off and did his version while I stayed in Hollywood and wrote mine. Taking these drafts, Wells drastically condensed and rearranged them and added some scenes of his own. The industry accused Wells of underplaying Mankovich's contribution to the script, but Wells countered the attacks by saying, at the end, naturally, I was the one making the picture after all, who had to make the decisions. I used what I wanted of Manx, and rightly or wrongly, kept what I liked of my own." Mankiewicz was to receive no credit for his work as he was hired as a script doctor. As the film neared release, however, Mankiewicz began wanting a writing credit and even threatened to take out full-page advertisements in trade papers and to get his friend Ben Hecht to write an exposé for the Saturday Evening Post. Mankiewicz also threatened to go to the Screenwriters Guild and claim full credit for writing the entire script by himself. The question was resolved in January 1941 when the studio, RKO Pictures, awarded Mankiewicz credit. The official credit reads screenplay by Herman J. Mankiewicz and Orson Welles. Supposedly it was Welles himself who circled his own name and put it below Mankiewicz's. But regardless of this, this little touch, Mankiewicz's rancor towards Welles grew over the remaining 12 years of his life. And again, you can watch a movie about that. Yeah. I believe it's still up on Netflix if you wanted to. So, yeah. Citizen Kane rejects the traditional linear chronological narrative and tells Kane's story entirely in flashbacks using different points of view, many from Kane's aged and forgetful associates, the cinematic equivalent of the unreliable narrator in literature, which I've got to say I love about this film. Wells also uses multiple narrators to recount Kane's life, a technique not used previously in Hollywood films. Each narrator recounts a different part of Kane's life, with each story overlapping one another. The film depicts Kane as an enigma, a complicated man who leaves viewers with more questions than answers as to his character, such as the newsreel footage where he's attacked for being both a communist and a fascist, which again, Thompson, the reporter, acts as the audience surrogate, questioning Kane's associates and piecing together his life. You know, there's some controversy about the fact that Wells was filming quote-unquote camera tests that were actually just scenes that would end up in the film for a while. By saying that they were camera tests, he got away with it and could say that it came in, under time and under budget because he'd already been filming for a month before they officially began. So, yeah, some very sly techniques there. But yeah, that's fair enough. But in terms of the writing, kind of, the story of Kane's life, did it impact you, Robert, as much as we've mentioned? Not just
no, not really. Because I mean, again, it's one of those where you go. The story is the story. It's a reflection actually on somebody else's life, and the fact that at the beginning you were almost given and this is the MacGuffin at the end that we've got to work out, Rosebud, right? Yeah. There wasn't that much to add to it. It's almost like the scene that you find you have in Family Guy. Where it's like, someone said the name in the film, great, in the film. And it's the same sort of thing. You're not invested in what is Rosebud, because I don't think they go into enough. One of the things that didn't come out in the script, I felt, was that the constant sort of meetings or discussions with all the journalists. It wasn't, to me, those bits weren't powerful enough to go, well, what the hell is Rosebud? Is it more scandal? Is it more this? Is it more, what is it? What is it? What is it?
Well, but I think that
weren't powerful enough.
I would argue, though, that was the point of that.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
We don't want it to be any more... help me out, Michael. What am I trying to say here?
Well, it kind of says the same at the end of the movie, where it says, like, ultimately, yes, that was the kind of impetus for them to have been sent off to examine his life, was what is the meaning of this?
Right,
but that was the inciting point. That wasn't the point. It was, examine this man's life. And at the end, the guy even says, the reporter says, like, I don't think any one word could sum up a man's life. It would never have been satisfying anyway, regardless of what the answer is.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No. I appreciate that. I needed a little help trying to explain what I was trying to say.
I mean, I appreciated that the film, because, it could have ended there, and I think it would still have been as impactful of a film if it had ended with saying, doesn't matter what Rosebud is, that's not what we're here for. That's not what this is about. We're examining this person's life. And
exactly,
as the guy says, Rosebud could be something that he simply wanted that he couldn't have because that was such a rarity. Could be something that was more.
Here's the genius of this, I think.
Yeah.
When the reporter says, could we really, would it have mattered? Could we really sum a man's life up with one word? I think it does sum up his life.
Oh, completely. I mean, it has that meaning, yeah.
And that's what's so great about how that's written.
Yeah.
Is because you would think this man had so many dimensions and so much about him. And actually, the tragedy of Kane is that you could boil his life down to that one word because he never got past it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's also, I mean, the other tragedy, of course, is that on the examination of his life, you're left coming away ultimately, although there are some good things at the beginning that he's standing up to his guardian and whatever, ultimately you're left with, well, this guy has no love, no empathy, no sort of joy in his heart or whatever. And his last words were like, no, he did once, but that was, when he was a child.
And so that was the last time he felt anything.
Exactly. But it does kind of reinforce the humanity that, when he wasn't born evil, quote unquote, it was kind of, it was the circumstances of a life lived, and it might have been very different if he hadn't been taken away from his parents or whatever else. Although his mother
would have ended up running the local paper,
exactly,
and
as I say, his mother was an evil witch that was the mother of Samantha from Bewitched. So
I was going to say, now don't
wasn't she fantastic?
Don't put that on Agnes now.
She was one of my favorites. I absolutely loved her performance. She is so believable in what she does.
You would not think it's the same kind of camp actress that does Bewitched, though, when you're watching
exactly
her mother, and you're like, wow, this is the same woman. Yeah. But yeah, I had to mention
the combination that she displays of cold, a bit of cold, dispassionate, but so devastated. Also, how she can play that mix of emotions through her eyes and just the way she's sitting and how she speaks. Boy, she's great. Well, everybody is, but she really is great.
She was outstanding. She just really was, to me, the most enjoyable moments was when she was there. Her presence was so impossible to ignore. Yeah. Can you imagine having a parent that is like that and you cannot ignore them? That'll mess up anybody's mind.
Well, she knows that the only choice to make is she has to give him away to that life, because otherwise he's stuck with an abusive alcoholic dad in a miserable little place. And
agreed.
I think it's devastating, but she feels this is his only chance to have a life.
Yeah. Completely.
And the irony of it is that he probably would have had a better life had that never happened to him,
Yeah. I think it's such a difficult line in that scene as well, because you do, or I do, get the sense that she really does love him, but she's just been forced into this by circumstance, and so that there's a kind of
I've had his bags packed for a week.
Yeah. But there's an attempted detachment there that it's kind of...
That's what I think is so brilliant.
It doesn't come off as like, I'm just cold and heartless. It's like, I'm blocking my emotions because if I don't, I'm going to break down. Kind of thing. And it's hard to play that because that's 2 levels right there, So.
I know. Well, that's... I know. It's like, how did she do that? It's so perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, very perfect. He was amazing.
One of many performances. I'm sure I'll mention some more as we keep talking. And but I think weirdly enough, I think the female actors in this were the ones that impressed me the most, because I think both of Kane's wives are also just fantastic performances. Particularly since they get to run the gamut of happiness to tragedy in both of their kind of stories. And not to downplay any of the men, as you mentioned. I think the guy who plays Jedediah is actually a really great kind of. He's good at the darker comedy kind of, black comedy side of things as well. But anyway, we're getting into the acting, so I'll move us along. So we've kind of started talking about the acting, so I wanted to do that as well. I've kind of mentioned, I think, a few of the things. Agnes Moorehead, I think, as Mary Kane was a standout for me. I think Ruth Warwick as Emily Monroe Norton Kane, and especially Dorothy Comingore, who not only is gorgeous, doesn't hurt, but I think plays the heck out of Susan Alexander Kane's role. Those would be my kind of MVPs of the acting. And yeah, I could mention a few scenes, but one of them is my favorite scene, so I don't want to get into it. So I'm going to, again, open the floor up and say, Nita, you know, even though you weren't like overly fond of the movie, you did appreciate the performances. Was there something that stood out for you that was one of your favorites? You mentioned Joseph Cotton, didn't you?
Yes. Oh my God, what a handsome man.
Oh, that's so funny. I love it.
Joseph Cotton was he had the classic handsome look of Hollywood of his time. He must have been just fawned over because he was so handsome. But Agnes Moorehead, I love her. She is absolutely brilliant in this movie. You know, Ruth Warwick was brilliant. Dorothy Comingore, I believe her last name is pronounced. She was absolutely brilliant. I think these women were just such powerhouses. And, you know, you don't have to have a big role to give a big performance. And I think that these women definitely gave it their all. And when they were in the scene, you knew they were in the scene. There was no denying it.
Definitely that's the case with Ruth Warwick, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that they just were powerful. They were powerful. They had such beautiful grace and style. And, you know, I love the characters, you know, that they just really, I felt like the actors gave a lot of themselves into these characters and made these characters very believable. And I really enjoy that. When I watch something, I want to feel like I'm watching something that the actors truly are like this, even though you know they're not, that is just a part, but you want to feel like, oh, this person is evil or this person is good, or, you know, and I feel like these actors really gave a lot into these roles.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Yes, and Rob, again, we haven't talked to you for a little while, so I'll direct this question at you. What did you make of the central performance of Orson Welles as Kane?
That to me is still the standout.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he's got the most work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He's got to portray the, you know, bear in mind he was 25 at the time.
I know. Yeah.
He was
unbelievable.
As far as I'm concerned, that's just a kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
And he had to very easy for the first couple of scenes. He wasn't in them. Later on, you know, where it's like, hey, here's Mr. Kane. He's bought the Examiner, the newspaper. He's now come away back from Europe, and here's this fresh-faced kid. It was those scenes and how his character evolved just in those scenes, very reminiscent of Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, because he started off as a copy of shit, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Further interesting.
Sort of like, hey, this is, you know, we're doing well, we're accelerating, stuff like that, and then having to portray, you know, later on as an old person. And I know you talk about the things like the makeup and the setup and stage design and stuff like that, and then portraying himself as an older man. You know, having to walk across scene, doing, you know, basically changing his tonation within his voice and stuff like that. All of those pieces I felt were absolutely excellent in terms of him acting, and it's a pity he hasn't been in much more else after that.
Yeah, I promised DK that I would say that DK says that this wasn't Welles' best performance. He didn't peak until he voiced Unicron in Transformers the movie. Okay, I leave that there. That's your opinion. DK's opinions do not necessarily represent the opinions of myself or the Cinema Classics podcast. I promised him I would mention it anyway. Sorry.
He should have been here to defend his opinion. He's not. The man did a good
leadership. Susan.
Yeah, it is the standout performance because he's had to do the most, not in terms of all the background stuff in the film, but in terms of the actor and the portraying things, the happy-go-lucky to the sadness and the sort of what have I done, what have I lost.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you're saying all this because it gives me having to say it because it's exactly what I would have said as well. So, yeah, I just want to echo exactly what you've just said, basically. So yeah, it's I think it's as well. It's the performance that is the hardest to pin down because the character is. So it's amazing that you don't, at least I don't find myself hating him throughout. I don't find myself loving him throughout. There are times that you laugh at, like I said, how cocky he comes off when he's like, "Oh, at this rate, I'll have to shut the paper down in 60 years." Haha. You know, you kind of. But then you also, in that same scene, you also hate him when he's like, "Oh, will there be a war? Don't you worry, I'll provide the war. I influence everything." And you're like, "Oh, what a jerk!" At the same time, you know? And then, as you say, the kind of although he's kind of done wrong with the kind of mistress thing, the scene where he basically it all comes crumbling down for him, and it's like, I'm not going to withdraw from the race. I'm going to just let you, expose this scandal, and my son and my mistress or whatever be damned. And the sheer rage and kind of loss that Welles portrays when he's screaming down the stairs at Geddes, when he's like, I'll put you in Sing Sing, with such vitriol. Well, that is such a well-played scene. I almost do feel sorry for him, even though he's in the wrong, So, yeah.
And can I just say about that line about putting you in Sing Sing? If you don't know, for those listening that may not know, that was one of the worst prisons that you can be sent to. It was considered horrible. Huge, big criminals there. And for someone to make a statement like that, it was really about identifying what they had done and what they viewed it as. And it was pretty impactful, I think, in that statement.
I think I'm glad we don't live in a world where a pompous politician would threaten to put his opponent in jail.
Yeah, can I make a couple of comments?
I was just going to come to you. Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously, I mean, you're a fan. So what have we not touched on that you like about the performances?
Let's. Number one, I think there's something that is intangible that you cannot duplicate, and that is the relationship that cast had beforehand.
Yes,
having all come from the Mercury Theater. Then into the film, there is that quality of familiarity between all of them, which is really important. That because he does have these relationships with these people, and it comes through in an emotional way beyond what is scripted or anything, just from their own relationships in real life. And I think that really helps sell the film.
Yeah, it's kind of built-in chemistry, isn't it? Really, yeah.
It is. There's a chemistry there that wouldn't be there if they weren't all so familiar with each other and trusted each other.
Yeah,
agreed.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to make sure I get everything out. But as I said, if this turns out to be a bumble-length episode, I do apologize. And I should say, we're not going to touch on everything about this movie because it's a dense movie, and there's been, entire university courses written about just this film. As I was looking at the Wikipedia page, it was kind of like, if I printed this out, it would be a flipping book. This is not a web page. It's insane. So yeah, if we missed something we haven't talked about this movie, just let it be the spark that leads you to go and examine it for yourself, because you could be on for a while and it's all fascinating, I think. So
let me just throw out Everett Sloan. Sloan as Bernstein. Love Everett Sloan in this.
Oh, Mr. Bernstein.
Yes.
He's a great.
He was fantastic.
Everett Sloan is so fantastic in this.
Yeah.
He's probably my little background favorite person.
Yeah. Sort of
sly he was MVP great. Yeah.
It's basically he had he wasn't played as the simpleton. That's not the case, because he ended up being a CEO at the end of it. No, board member. And he says, the line in there that I thought every board member should take notes. I'm a chairman of the board. I've got lots of time to chat with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the giant chair. I love the giant chair.
But I think him as a because the character the character at the beginning is very chittery. It's like a little chipmunk going off, going, "I'll help you. I'll do this. I'll do that."
And then
I'll move this and I'll shift this. And at the end, he's like, yes, he's still, he's the youngest, oldest one out of them, but he's sort of very respectable. I'm now chairman of the board. I'm very sort of in control of what I'm saying and what I'm doing, but I had so much respect for him.
Yeah.
That to me was a clever bit of acting, a clever bit of change in pace of that particular character that was beautifully portrayed.
I think all the actors do a great job of portraying, as you kind of said, just I'll let this be the last thing, portraying the different people at different stages in their life.
Yeah.
You never question that kind of, like, for example, the montage that you mentioned of Kane's first wife. It's like she's sitting in the same spot and probably filming that like minutes apart, and yet you feel like decades have passed, and you really feel the weight of that time on not just her, but also on Orson Welles playing that scene. And they're kind of all like that, like I said, the makeup is fantastic. It's doing a lot of the job when you're looking at sort of Susan Kane or Charles Kane in their older years, but also the performances have to be there. This is as you said, it's a 25-year-old playing a man on his deathbed, and you don't question it. It's like, okay.
But everything conspires to work together to create that illusion as well. That scene that you're talking about, what I love is, the montage of he and his wife every morning.
Yes.
The table gets longer and longer. Have you noticed that?
I read this,
it starts out that they're together on this little square table right next to each other. As time goes on, as they become more distant, the table in the scene gets longer and longer and longer until they're on either end of a huge table.
Yeah,
all of these little details.
It's a beautiful little detail, but then at times it's almost overused, because that same scene is replicated again with his second wife. They're not at the breakfast table, but she's doing a jigsaw.
And he's
and it's like he's at the fireplace,
right?
And it's almost as if it's slightly different, and it's changed better, but it's still in my head overused. He's doing the jigsaw, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing? You do the jigsaw." And then it cuts. He moves away, and then it's the next cutaway as they're getting older, and she's moved the jigsaw towards the fireplace, almost to say, "I want to come closer to you," right? Yeah. But he's like, no, I'm stepping away, and it's almost like, here's the chair. You can already tell that he's like distancing himself yet again. Like, I know, we'll take this chair and take it almost to the other end of the room, which is the biggest room you've ever seen in your life. I'll stop here now, and we can just do a massive long shot.
And that's brilliant. That's brilliant that you used this visual to express what he was emotionally going through. Because I think that's definitely
that's another reason why this movie is so brilliant, because it's like it all works together. The cinematography, the script, the acting, to create each of those scenes, and it's just so great. It's brilliant. I do agree. I hadn't thought about it being overused.
I do have a slight counter to that, if you guys don't mind, which is that I think the message in the second part of that isn't so much about, it's in the first time it's people drifting apart, and because they're people. I think a lot of those last scenes, and in particular that one, are more about like they have this palace, this epic place they live in, Xanadu, but it's so hollow and so empty, and every line of dialogue echoes. And as you say, even when they're together and they're supposed to be a loving couple, they are miles apart, and they can't even hear each other. And I think that's not so much saying that's their state. I mean, it is their state in their marriage, but it's also echoing, like, even though you've got everything and you've got all the riches, you've got keeping you apart.
There's another flip in that scene alone, because it's sort of, in the first time they do it, they have the fire is on,
Yeah.
The fireplace is open, and there's a big fire in there as well. And you think, God, you could melt metal in that.
Yeah.
And then as the thing goes on, it's like when she's at the fireplace doing Jigsaw, the fire is off.
Right.
The love is gone. The heat out of this relationship is no more.
Yeah.
And there is also distance as well. And it's like at that point, you kind of think, right, you've really layered the point here, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Do this again.
I see what you mean.
Yes, I don't know. I think it's great though. I still think it's like I understand what you're saying, but I think
don't get me wrong. It's beautifully on how it's done.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things where you're going, you're telling a story,
right,
and you're using the same plot points again and again, right, in two different relationships. Would it have been better to try and think, is there a different way of doing this particular story, of demonstrating the distance or demonstrating how they fall apart?
The thing that, although you could argue that we're going to do it the same because he keeps making the same mistakes over and over again.
True.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking maybe it was more about showing
he doesn't change. Emotions. He doesn't change in those relationships.
Yes,
he's the same.
He makes these same mistakes, the same patterns, the same method, and maybe that was what they were trying to do.
Yeah, maybe so.
And I appreciate what Rob is saying, that making it different would have been clever. But maybe what's even more clever is that they didn't, because they were talking about
it's like, oh, here we go again.
Emotion. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't learn from my mistakes. I'm going back to the patterns that I have always had, kind of deal. Maybe.
I also, I think, propelling us into the next section, which is going to be the directing, I think on a real world level as well, they were also just so proud of this was the first time that they'd done what they call the deep focus, where something in the back.
Well, no, they'd actually used it before on a couple of cowboy films. So
okay, fair enough.
It had been, but had never been used so extensively. That's
and so
the director was just so proud of that he puts it in as many chances as he can of like background and foreground in focus.
But I think it's so important. I love it, man.
Yeah,
it works.
For sure. Yeah.
The best. Can I throw out what I think is the best example of deep focus?
Yeah, definitely go for it.
Because there's a lot of them. There's so many in this movie, and I could just talk about deep focus all day, which is really weird. I just think the most brilliant use of deep focus, and we're going to go back, guys, to one of our favorite early scenes, is the scene with his mother. Mm-hmm. And my God, I can't think of his name. The guy in charge of his estate.
I just keep calling him the Guardian because I forgot his name.
My gosh, I can't believe I can't think of it. Anyway, so there, that scene that you were talking about where she's saying, I've had his bags packed for a week, and they're talking. It also ties in with the sound, but we'll talk about that later. But in the deep background is the window, and he is out there playing with Rosebud in complete focus at the very back of the room while they're having their conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I just think that, for me, that's my favorite deep focus moment, because you get everything in that one deep shot, and you need that deep shot for that. Yeah. Here you are talking, the foreground is them talking, but the whole room and that window clear back in the back, and you see him in deep focus playing with Rosebud, not a care in the world while they're deciding his future.
Yeah, you can't get that across any other way. That's the beauty of that scene.
Yes,
in terms of establishing the situation. You've got there is basically four characters in there. You've got Kane, you've got his drunken father, you've got his mother, you've got the what's his name, Mr. Thatcher, who is
thank you
who is purchasing the child, and you can see the grief on her face, and she's just going, I'm doing this for my son. I'm doing this for my son. This is why I'm doing this. You can see Charles Foster Kane in the background, just having the day of his life in the snow, right? You know, you had all of that information going on. It was layers after layers of information, and then it's kind of finished with, you know, the dad trying to go, oh no, I want the kid back. I might be a drunk and all the rest of it, but he's still my son. Oh, how much? Oh yeah, I guess that'll be fine, because it was sort of, I can't remember whether it was $1,500 a month or was it $15,000 a month? I can't remember. But $1,500 a month was a hell of a lot of money back then.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, it's and on his death or whatever, they would still get money as well.
Yeah.
It was a win-win.
And the sad thing is that was a common real thing that would happen in back then, where people would sell their children because they had no way of taking care of them.
Yeah, and all because his mom just happened to come across the deed, you know, in her life.
I was going to say, because of the deed, you know.
Yeah.
And nothing, and then just really good investments and stuff. And yeah. Although it is kind of amusing that he talks about, like, oh, I'm the richest man in the world. I've got $60 million.
Oh, I know. I always do what I do. Anytime I see a movie like that, I just in my head, I add like 4 zeros.
Yeah, exactly. Now you wouldn't even be in the top 100 richest people in America.
Exactly.
Anyway. So I'm going to move to the directing, because I'm so sorry for keeping you guys here so long, but again, I could talk about this all day. So forgive me.
It was something totally different. And something that you couldn't believe movies could do, you know. Orson Kane. Orson Welles, you know, famously said, you know, when asked so many times about, you know, about the cinematography and the direction, and you know, he says, ignorance, my dear boy, you know, it's all done out of ignorance. You know, I didn't know anything about film. I didn't know that there are things that they said you could and couldn't do. I figured it's the film, and everything that's in my imagination, I'm just going to put on the screen. And if we didn't know how to do it, I had Toland, who was the best cinematographer at the time, who was also willing to try anything new.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And create all these new things.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. I'll just, I kind of want to finish off the thoughts with regards to that, because I just have a couple of things more about the direction. But that was one of the things I did have that, you know, that Wells credited his own ignorance with why he was able to be so groundbreaking. So, yeah. In terms of like how Wells approached the film, though, the production advisor, Miriam Geiger, compiled a handmade film textbook for Wells. It was a practical book of film techniques that he studied. He then taught himself filmmaking by matching his visual vocabulary to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and films by Frank Capra, Rene Clair, Fritz Lang, and Jean Renoir. Which might be another reason why it was kind of black and white that he was studying. The one film he studied in detail was John Ford's Stagecoach, which he apparently watched 40 times. Indeed, during Citizen Kane, the camera looks up at Charles Foster Kane and his best friend Jedediah, but down at quote-unquote weaker characters like Susan. And this was a technique that Orson Welles borrowed from John Ford, which I noticed so much on this viewing after reading that.
I never knew that, and now I'm going to notice that.
When you read that and then you watch the film back, you'll notice, like, the scenes, for example, when he takes over the office, the camera seems like it's on the floor looking up, and it's so visible. You know, because it's like I'm powerful. The camera will. And then as you're saying, when it's like, but then the flip side of that, the best example would be when they're interviewing Susan at the nightclub, and the camera almost seems like it's in the ceiling, looking down at this kind of it's kind of, you know. So yeah. Anyway, Wells has said, I learned whatever I knew in the production room from John Ford. After dinner every night for about a month, I'd run Stagecoach, often with some different technician or department head from the studio, and ask questions. How was this done? Why was this done? It was like going to school. So self-taught, I guess, in that way. And relating to kind of like what we were saying about kind of understanding it in context of what these things were, even though they weren't necessarily unique and new things. The critic David Bordwell wrote, the best way to understand Citizen Kane is to stop worshipping it as a triumph of technique. He argues the film did not invent any of these techniques like deep focus cinematography, shots of the ceiling, chiaroscuro lighting, and temporal jump cuts, and that many of these stylistics had been used in German expressionist films of the 20s, like the aforementioned Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. But Bordwell asserts that the film did put them all together for the first time and perfected the medium in one single film. Arguments against the film's cinematic innovations were made as early as 1946, when the French historian Georges Sadoul wrote, "The film is just an encyclopedia of old techniques." He pointed out such examples of compositions that used both the foreground and the background in the films of Auguste and Louis Lumière, special effects used in the films of Georges Méliès, shots of the ceiling in Erich von Stroheim's Greed, and newsreel montages in the films of Ziga Vertov. But critic André Bazin disagreed with Sadoul and stated that even if Welles did not invent the cinematic devices employed in Citizen Kane, one should nevertheless credit him with the invention of their meaning, which I think is a very interesting and important way of putting it. Like, yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Citizen Kane was edited by Robert Wise and assistant editor Mark Robson. Both would become successful film directors. Robert Wise, if you didn't know, directed The Day the Earth Stood Still and Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is why it was relevant to my life. So yeah, we go.
yes, that's right.
Yes.
And yeah, Mark Robson began editing the film while it was still shooting and said that they, quote, "could tell certainly that we were getting something very special. It was outstanding film day in and day out." The film, unlike this podcast, was very well planned out and intentionally shot with such post-production techniques as slow dissolves. The lack of coverage made editing easy, since Welles and Toland edited the film in camera by leaving few options of how it could be put together. Wise said that the breakfast table sequence took weeks to edit and get the correct timing and rhythm for the whip pans and overlapping dialogue. I was going to mention earlier as well, there was also a breakaway table, which they pulled the camera through to get some of the shots, which apparently one of the giveaways of that is that you can still see Kane's wife's hat slightly wobble when the camera goes through the table.
Wow, now that's some deep investigation there.
That's details that maybe most people didn't quite catch.
You would never notice it. You just think like a slight gust of wind or something. But if you know you're looking out for it, you can be like, "That's where the camera moved through the table."
That's right. Aha!
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Moving on to music and sound, because I know that you did want to add something here, but I have a couple of small things. Welles hired Bernard Herrmann to compose the film's score. Where most Hollywood film scores were written quickly, in as few as 2 or 3 weeks after filming was completed, Herrmann was given 12 weeks. He had sufficient time to do his own orchestrations and conducting, and worked on the film as it was shot and cut reel by reel. He wrote complete musical pieces for some of the montages, and Welles edited many of the scenes to match their length. When Rosebud is burned, Welles choreographed the scene with Bernard Herrmann's cue actually playing on the set, which is unheard of, but it's so brilliant.
That's
as well.
Really cool. I never heard that. That's neat.
Yeah. So what about you then? What were you going to add about the kind of music sound design?
Well, once again, sound is another character in this film, and it things again that we hadn't. Well, I will continue to say that we hadn't seen as Americans. Let's say it that way.
Yeah.
And things we would never have thought about hearing. Something that comes to mind is the deep focus scene we've talked about, with the family. There's also a deep focus when it comes to the audio in that part of that scene, because while they're talking and negotiating, giving away Charles, you can also actually hear Charles talking, the Union forever, and he's playing out there, and so you're actually hearing him talking as well at the same time.
For sure.
The great scene with her name just flew out of my head. His second wife, Susan. When she's talking about when they are out camping. And he slaps her in the face.
Don't say you're sorry.
But what you actually hear is outside the revelers, you hear a woman screaming.
Yep. Yes.
Screaming. And that is telling you what's in her head at that moment. That's her screaming.
Definitely.
There is sound design throughout the film like this, where it puts you in even deeper with the emotions of the characters or what's happening around them, because the sound is just as deep and concentrated as every other aspect of the film.
Yeah, for sure.
And he comes from a radio background, and so that part of it was very, very natural for him.
For sure.
To want to include all this dynamic sound.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I should say as well, by the way, that Bernard Herrmann, if you aren't aware, and you probably should be, he also composed the famous legendary score for Psycho.
Oh, yeah.
The shower scene. And he composed the song Twisted Nerve, which you've probably heard being whistled in the Kill Bill movies.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
So yeah, pretty much a bit of a legend in sound and music terms. So,
well, yeah, he was. Yeah, he and Hitchcock had a long, very storied career together.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Awesome. Unlike our regular Silver Screen podcasts and our cult classics, we don't really ask on social media for an audience response because we're looking at films that are generally very well regarded, and it would seem redundant. And I think it's kind of better to look at it on a critical perspective, both contemporary to the film and modern, views on it, and if they may have changed. So there's a lot being written about Citizen Kane, so this is going to be a hefty amount to get to. I do apologize, but I think it is all relevant. I am very aware that you don't want to just listen to me rambling, though, the entire time, so I have enlisted my cohorts here, my very own equivalent of a poached newspaper staff, to help me out. So yeah, as regards the critics, then, as I said, there's all kinds of approaches to this, and I'm going to start with you, John. I think you have the intro part, if you don't mind.
Sure. Contemporary reviews fell into 3 different categories: great, mixed, and negative. The day following the film's premiere, New York Times critic Bosley Crowther wrote that, quote, "It comes close to being the most sensational film ever made in Hollywood. Count on Mr. Welles. He doesn't do things by halves. Upon the screen, he discovers an area large enough for his expansive whims to have free play. And the consequence is that he's made a picture of tremendous and overpowering scope, not in physical extent so much as in its rapid and graphic rotation of thoughts. Mr. Welles has put upon the screen a motion picture that really moves." The Washington Post called it, quote, "one of the most important films in the history of filmmaking." The Washington Evening Star said Welles was a genius who's created, quote, a superbly dramatic biography of another genius and a picture that is revolutionary. New York Daily News critic Kate Cameron called it, quote, "one of the most interesting and technically superior films that has ever come out of a Hollywood studio." New York World Telegram critic William Bonnell said that the film, quote, "was staggering and belongs at once among the greatest screen achievements." Time magazine wrote that it has found important new techniques in picture making and storytelling. Life magazine's review said that few movies have ever come from Hollywood with such powerful narrative, such original technique, such exciting photography. John C. Mosher of The New Yorker calls the film's style like fresh air and raved, "something new has come to the movie world at last." John O'Hara's Newsweek review called it the best picture he'd ever seen and said Welles was, quote, "the best actor in the history of acting," unquote. Welles called O'Hara's review the greatest review that anybody ever had.
Though it should be stated that O'Hara hadn't yet seen the planet-eating robot, so,
That is very true. Very true.
So, yeah, thank you so much for that, John. That was fantastic. Awesome read there as well. And Nita, you have, I think, the next section on the more mixed to negative reviews.
Yes, it says other reviews were mixed. Edward Charler of the Los Angeles Times said it was brilliant and skillful at times, but had an ending that rather fizzled. The Chicago Tribune called the film interesting and different, but its sacrifice of simplicity to the eccentricity robs it of distinction and general environment environment values. Otis Ferguson of the New Republic criticized its style, calling it a retrogression in film technique, and stating that it holds no great place in film history. How wrong was he? He dismissed the celebrated visual techniques as just willful babbling and the old shell game. In a rare film review, filmmaker Eric von Stroheim criticized the film story and non-linear structure, but praised the technical style and performances, and wrote, "Whatever the truth may be about it, Citizen Kane is a great picture and will go down in screen history more powerful to Wells." Some prominent critics wrote negative reviews. None of them dismissed the film as being altogether bad, noting the film's undeniable technical effect, but they did find fault with the narrative. Alan Krillman of the New York Sun called it a cold picture, unemotional, a puzzle rather than a drama. Paddler's James Agate called it the well-intentioned, muddled, amateurish thing one expects from highbrows. He admitted that he was a quite good film, but insisted that it tried to run the psychological essay in a harness with your detective thriller and doesn't quite succeed. After watching the film on January 29, 1942, future British star Kenneth Williams, then age 15, cruelly described the film in his first diary as Boshi rot. Oh, Matron, indeed. And for Americans, Boshi rot is referring to someone's person of mental or intellectual state.
Fair enough. Yeah, Kenneth Williams not a fan of the movie then, but
no, he was not.
It wasn't Carry On films clearly, but anyway. So yeah, I'll finish us off then with this and say that although it was a critical success, Citizen Kane failed to recoup its costs at the box office. It faded from view after release, but returned to public attention when it was praised by French critics such as André Bazin and re-released in 1956. In 1958, it was voted number 9 on the prestigious Brussels 12 list at the 58 World Expo. Modern critics have given Citizen Kane an even more positive response. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes reports that 99% of 125 critics gave the film a positive review, with an average rating of 9.7 out of 10. In April 2021, it was noted that the addition of an 80-year-old negative review from the Chicago Tribune had reduced the film's rating from 100% to 99% on the site. Citizen Kane held its 100% rating until early 2021. On Metacritic, however, the film still has a very rare weighted average score of 100 out of 100, based on 19 critics, indicating universal acclaim. The film was included by the Vatican in a list of important films compiled in 1995 under the category of art. Film critic Roger Ebert wrote of it, "Its surface is as much fun as any movie ever made. Its depths surpass understanding. I have analysed it a shot at a time with more than 30 groups, and together we have seen, I believe, pretty much everything that is there on the screen. The more clearly I can see its physical manifestation, the more I am stirred by its mystery." And get ready to take a drink, regular listeners. The Library of Congress selected Citizen Kane as an inductee of the 1989 inaugural group of 25 films for preservation in the US National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Yay! So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself. There's nothing we really need to necessarily add.
No, that certainly does wrap it up nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it sure does.
Very much so. I think, yeah, a film that's appreciated a lot more nowadays. And thank you so much to you guys for the line readings there. So yeah, we've only just scratched the surface of Citizen Kane, but we kind of have to wrap this up. So again, if you've been interested by any of this, feel free to do your own exploration of the movie. It really is quite rich, and I think you'll be rewarded for it. So yeah, we want to get your favorite character moment in line, which is something I always do. I know DK doesn't do it in his Cult Classics, but I like to do it just to get a kind of a feel for what hit you personally in the movie. So start with your favorite character and why, if you don't mind.
I'd say that my favorite character is Charles Foster Kane. At the end of the day, that it's all about him. Let's face it. And as a character all the way through, seeing it grow and develop, and seeing different and how the character and also the acting was then able to portray the different viewpoints. So as you go through the different sort of, the characters of Leyland, of Bernstein, of Thatcher and stuff like that, all those different character points of how they viewed him all come out in those sections, which I think is a beautiful portrayal. But in terms of my favorite line, it is that simple one from his father, which is like, oh yeah, $1,500. Yeah, I suppose that's all right.
Got you.
Because it's just sort of, it's like, out of all the things, he's the most honest person.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
That's the way it might be my way of looking at it.
No, it makes sense. Absolutely, yeah. Awesome. So that's your favorite sort of character, your favorite line. Do you have a moment or a scene that stands out amongst all the others for you?
Purely from an artistic point of view, the actually burning of the sledge at the end, the Rosebud sledge. Spoiler alert: it's the sledge.
Kind of already spoiled that a few times before.
Wait a minute, what?
Had any doubts? It's like Titanic; it sinks at the end. But it's all the different layers of. I also do woodwork, car mechanics, software technology and stuff like that. But just watching the different layers, bubble up and thing to me is another juxtaposition of all the different layers of, Kane and himself all coming away in that very final scene of just watching the flames, burn it all away, and yet you can still see the words Rosebud throughout the entire section of that burning away.
That's a level of metaphor I hadn't even assigned to it.
I'm
going to see that every time when I watch that now. Yeah. Awesome. And so do you have a conclusion, as brief or as long as you want, and then just a score out of 5, please? Out of 5 stars.
I'll do the easy part. Score-wise, for technology, for story, for technology, of its time, 5 out of 5. Is it my personal cup of tea? No, I'd say it's a 3 out of 5. All right.
Right.
So I can't give an average or anything like that. I don't want to give it a 4 because actually, I truly appreciate and understand what it did for the cinema system of the time. And everything started replicating, and still today, with if you rewatch things like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, you can see how Tarantino's taken aspects of that and kept it in and put it into his films. Particularly the death scene at the end of Reservoir Dogs. So for that point of view, there is so much information on the film because it is just layers and layers of stuff that you could actually take with other films. But I think because of Orson Welles, because of the team that he had around them, that they weren't unknowns, but they were all effectively being unleashed by the cinema system at the time, and the control that was there, that you got such a powerful and cinematic great. And also bear in mind is that it was 1941. So like, Wizard of Oz, it could have actually been done in color. But they still chose to keep it in black and white. And I don't think anybody's really picked that out, but I think that adds to it. I think if it was done in color, it would have been horrible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was
there
was a controversy where they had said that Ted Turner, because he was going through, colorizing Casablanca and stuff, and there was a rumor going around he was going to colorize Citizen Kane, which turned out not to be true, because I think Orson Welles was like, "Keep your crayons away from my movie, you Philistine." Yeah. But I mean, I think that fits into the use of the lighting and the chiaroscuro, as they call it, in the shadow. It wouldn't have worked not being in black and white, so I think that is absolutely a choice, as you say. But anyway, sorry. So your final score, then, anyway, to bring it back around and let you get out of here.
I'd say it's definitely. I'd still say it's a 5.
Okay. Okay.
But from a subjective point of view, it is a 5.
Like, you may not love it, but you can appreciate what it did.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
As long as you put yourself into, it's 1941, and I'm watching a film that is just different to anything else I've seen before.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Cool. Well, if you want to shoot off, then we can let you go now.
Thank you very much, folks. It's been beautiful. Love it.
It's been great meeting you, Rob.
Wonderful.
You too, guys.
Hopefully chat to you again soon.
All the best.
I'll bring us home then by starting with favorite character moment and line, as I mentioned earlier. So I'll come to you first, John. What was your favorite character in the moment and why? In the movie, sorry, and why?
Gosh darn. I had pulled up a quote that I loved, and now I can't find it.
Oh, no.
Do you want to skip me for a second?
Okay, yeah, Nita. So, Nita, did you have a favorite character in the movie and the reason?
I absolutely did, which was Agnes Moorehead's Mary Kane.
Mary Kane.
She was phenomenal. I think her journey as a woman, as a mother in the 40s, in a time where women had no power, no authority, to make the decisions she had to make for her son, thinking that they were the best for him. And whether or not we agree to that, we do need to see that had to have been difficult for her. And I think that journey that she portrayed in that character really was so important in the development and of her son. And she played a bigger role than she probably herself thought when she made that decision of who he would become. And that's not a position that I envy or wish on anyone, because it has to be just so harrowing. And as far as favorite lines, there isn't a line she didn't deliver that she didn't deliver with power and authority. I said, go for it, girl. I mean, she had me wanting to continue to watch it. Like, even though it wasn't one of my favorite classics, it was the performances that made me want to watch it, continue to see it. Absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. And so that's your favorite character. Do you and your favorite line? Anything by Mary Kane? I guess you would say it was what you were going to say.
Oh, absolutely. Anything. Her whole entire scenes were just phenomenal.
And is your favorite moment that scene at the beginning with his parents as well?
I think that when she realizes what she has to do and what's it going to cost, and how she's affected by it, how she reacts. The fact that she can give you this narcissistic, personality, yet make you feel compassionate for her. It's a really difficult place to be. I mean, you got to give kudos to actors, no matter what the part is that you do. If you do it with that level of conviction, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think that's a testament to the famous quote, isn't it? There's no small parts, because in what you might think is a relatively small role, it shows the importance of that character and that actress. So yeah, fantastic. Did you want me to give my favorite things first, John, or are you happy to go?
I can go if you want. I got my stuff up here now. I just wanted
favorite character and moment in line. We'll start with character then.
Yeah, character is really hard because they're all so good in this. I don't want to be boring, but I can't disagree with Rob. I mean, I can't think of, my gosh, his performance as Kane is just nothing short of brilliant. From 25 to however old he was when he died, I don't remember. There's not a false note. The physicality that he uses, the voice. Again, now you got makeup coming in. The cool thing they did where they aged his eyes with contact lenses.
Yeah.
I can't get past his performance though. I mean, it's obviously the linchpin of the entire film.
For sure.
And I don't know that you can really even say anybody else is as good in this. However, I will say my favorite quote in the movie would go with maybe somebody that you could argue as another great character in the film is of course Joseph Cotton as Jed Leland. Leland kind of the brother figure that never fell for Kane's BS. So that's a brilliant role. I think one of my favorite lines in the film out of so many is from Jed. And he says, that's all he ever wanted out of life was love. That's the tragedy of Charles Foster Kane. You see, he just didn't have any to give.
Yes, I love that line. There's so many. I could be here all day listing them, but I've narrowed it down for mine. But yeah, so many great lines in this. Again, just watch the movie and appreciate it. But yeah, we didn't get a favorite moment or scene from you. Sorry to interrupt and jump in.
I really am always drawn to the scene where he absolutely destroys the bedroom.
Oh yeah, at the very end. Yeah,
a tantrum, a child tantrum. I'm not getting my way. And I mean, just even filming that scene must have been exhausting.
Yeah.
He puts 200% into that and destroys that room.
It's so cool.
And then wanders out as a zombie with that great shot of the mirrors where you see an endless line of Kanes walking as a zombie.
Yeah,
that whole sequence for me is
awesome choice. Fantastic, cool. Well, I'll jump in with my stuff then. Sorry, mine's quite written out because I like to be prepared. Believe it or not.
Whoa,
really?
My goodness, a little dig there.
I know, right?
No shade. I'm just meaning I'm too autistic.
How very posh of you.
No. I mean, to your point, I think it's worth noting that favorite character doesn't necessarily have to mean the one that you morally align with. And so I was close to picking Kane because obviously he is the most compelling, the central figure, and a great performance. But my favorite, though, I'm gonna go with Susan Alexander Kane.
Good.
She gets such a relatable, tragic, and heartfelt story. It's within Charles's life story, but she starts off lonely, thinks that she's found the love to cure it, and winds up forced into being even lonelier still.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a bravura performance of that as well. Everything from when you first meet and the kind of romantic, playing of the piano to, like you said, that kind of, oh, I can't do this to you. Well, yes, I absolutely can, and it just breaks him and leads to that absolute rage, So favorite scene or moment? Well, the beginning and the end seem obvious, but I should mention that they are still incredibly impactful. But I've got to go with the confrontation scene between the four-way. Kane, Geddes, Susan, and Emily. I just think it's beautifully shot. It's played brilliantly. It reveals so much narratively and about Kane's character. And it's a masterclass in tension, the way it starts, slowly builds, breaks down Kane, and then again, it ends in him just screaming with rage, the impotent rage at the things he can't control, which, is something of a theme, I think, of the things I liked about the film. So yeah, I just enjoy seeing men who think they can control everything not being able to. Can't imagine why,
I have a quick question. Did she do much after this? Because she's so good in this.
I don't know. I didn't look into it, but I
don't really remember her doing anything else.
Yeah. No, I don't. I've certainly never seen her in anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, she was you're right, though. That's such a good scene.
Yeah.
It could be all of those mixed reviews that caused some of the actors not to be seen too much again.
Well, on her part,
Yeah.
That's what I wonder. Well, that's a hit. There you go, listeners, viewers. That's something to look into. Wonder what happened to her career, and I wonder if Hearst had anything to do with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. My favorite quote then. I want to pick any of the quotes describing Kane, his need for love on need for love on his terms, but his inability to give it, that you've already kind of said. But there's too many of those to choose from, and again, find them for yourselves. And in the end, something stuck with me that's not even part of the main story at all, and yet I think it reflects everything about the way the story ponders the nature of a life, regrets, love, and the moments that define us. And it's by Mr. Bernstein. And it's the quote, "A fellow will remember a lot of things you wouldn't think he'd remember. You take me. One day back in 1896, I was crossing over to Jersey on the ferry. And as we pulled out, there was another ferry pulling in. And on it, there was a girl waiting to get off. A white dress she had on. She was carrying a white parasol. I only saw her for 1 second. She didn't see me at all. But I'll bet a month hasn't gone by since that I haven't thought of that girl." I just think that is such a beautifully written line. That's a movie within itself, that line, you know.
I got chills.
I know, right?
You know what? That's a great selection. Yeah. What a great bit that is. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
Precisely. And boy, that says everything too. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, yeah, he didn't
I love
that.
I love, and I love. Well, again, you know, I love Sloane, Everett Sloane so much, and yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So then all that's left just to do is our final conclusion and our score out of 5 stars. Nita, would you like to go first?
Oh yeah, this is hard because. I don't want to be cool.
Well, don't feel bullied. Just be honest. We're not going to judge you one way or the other.
You are so going to judge me. I know you so well. I'm going to give it a 3 because it wasn't my favorite or it wasn't something that I super enjoyed. But I do recognize that it made huge strides and opened so many doors in the film industry. And it was truly ahead of its time because I don't think that before this film, there was a film about an actual real person that was still alive and their life was being exposed in the way that this film was doing. Even though not directly with like the names and everything had been changed, but there was enough there that people knew what this referencing to. So I'm going to give it a 3.
Okay. That's fine. That's cool. And do you think you've got a bit of an extra appreciation, though, now that we've discussed the film?
I think so. I think that with you and Rob and, all 3 of you guys' contribution to the film and your thoughts and feelings about it does give me a different perspective. And quite frankly, I think I'm going to go rewatch it at some
I was just going to ask that. That's cool. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Thank you for coming on and being honest, even if you didn't love the film. Then in that case, that's fair enough.
Well, I have to say, when I first saw it, I said, I'm going to kill him.
Wow.
You made me watch this. I'm going to kill him.
It's no fun if we all feel the same way, you know?
Exactly.
And there probably are people that will be watching that will be like, I don't get it, maybe. But again, if you do feel that way, then maybe let us explain why we love it. And then maybe you'll grow to love it and see what we see in it as well. And if so, great. If not,
exactly.
You know, yeah. Cool. John, did you want to go next with your conclusion and score?
Yes, because I know you have a nicely well-composed review. So yes, I'm leaving you till last because it'll be nice. And I'll do an unprepared version here of mine. It's a 5. It's okay. Actually it's a 6.
Wow.
It's everything I've talked about. I can't say enough about how this film changed cinema. Almost every aspect of this film is a study of something that happened and probably would never happen again. Nobody had ever been given complete control of a film like that.
Yeah.
And afterwards, never happened again.
Yeah.
So from that to the selection of actors, the writing, it is for me, the first moment that I saw a film and I felt like Orson Welles in that. Wow. Movies can do so much more than I realized.
Yes.
Because I was, 17 when I saw it the first time. And I was a huge movie buff already. But when I saw it, I also immediately recognized, oh my gosh, that's how they come up with this camera angle. That's why they do this now. Oh, it's not unusual to see this now, but this had never been done before. Every aspect of it to me makes it an absolute classic in every sense of the word.
Absolutely awesome. Yeah. It's just, I mean, you can't underestimate the impact, if nothing else. So, I've got my, over prepared little film.
Not over prepared. Well prepared.
Hold your applause till the end if you don't like.
You can't just be prepared. You got to be over prepared.
Exactly. So this is my review. I start by saying the very definition of a masterpiece: visually stunning, thematically rich, prophetic, heartfelt, beautifully acted, directed with groundbreaking artistic flair and with depth to spare. A stunning dissection of the rot at the heart of the American dream, a cautionary tale, a true exploration of a certain type of person and of a life lived, not your average life, but that of a person with riches, power, influence, and ultimately it's still not enough to give love, class, or a conscience. Like I said, prophetic. There aren't superlatives enough for this film. Every time I watch it, I'm completely gripped by the writing and the acting, in awe of all the techniques that have been discussed at length. But on top of that, it always just makes me feel. I want to dive into this as much as Bernstein wants to dive into the meaning of that iconic last word and the life of the man who uttered it. I could talk at length about how I feel regarding these characters, the meaning of their actions and personalities, the filmmaking methods, the real-world echoes, both then and now. In the end, though, I'm left with one feeling most of all, similarly to several people who reviewed this on First Watch. This is cinema. This is the benchmark to aim for, and this is why I love this art form, because at its best, it's powerful, transcendent, influential, emotive, compelling, rich, and gorgeous. Or to put it simply, it's Citizen Kane. There's a reason it's become a standard metaphor for quality. It truly is the Citizen Kane of movies. And I give it 5 out of 5. So, Thank you. We pop those scores together and divide by the 4 of us that reviewed this. Then gives you a final score for Citizen Kane of 4.5 out of 5, which I can't be too mad at. So fantastic. And as I said, hopefully if you've kind of had mixed feelings about this, do know it took a little while for it to click with me as well, but when it did, it really did. And hopefully if you, I think, examine the real world behind the scenes stories and everything of it, they're equally as fascinating. You don't even have to come away from that and like the movie more, but I think there's enough there to dive into. And it's fascinating, the creation of this film, how it came about, the controversy surrounding it. So there's lots to dive into. And so, excuse me, like the snow drifting over Xanadu, we bring this journey through Citizen Kane to a close. We've explored the legend, the legacy, and the life of Charles Foster Kane, but as we now know, some mysteries aren't as grand as we expect. Rosebud wasn't power, wealth, or ambition, just the lost memory of a simpler time. Much like Kane's final words, this podcast will linger in the air for a little while longer, so be sure to follow Silver Screen Cinema Classics on your podcast platform of choice, and let us know your thoughts on this filmic titan. Links to our social media are always in the link tree in each episode's description or flashing on screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. And a huge thanks to my wonderful guests, Sci-Fi Queen, Nita. Thank you, first of all, for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me. I always love hanging out with the boys.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening to us gush about the film, even if you weren't necessarily agreeing. There's sometimes nothing worse than listening to people gush and thinking, I didn't get it. Thank you for where can people find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me on most platforms: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, under Sci-Fi Queen, and I'm our YouTube channel, which is Sci-Fi Queens, and you can go to our webpage as well, sci-fiqueens.net. Our next episode will be April 4th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to be talking about time travel in science fiction.
Oh, nice. Great topic. Excellent.
Yes.
I'll be sure to tune into that one for sure.
Yes, and we've got some really great topics all the way through June that were covered all the way through June 20th. And so if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see we're going to be celebrating Pride Month in June. We're going to be celebrating Mother's Day. We're going to be doing a lot of celebrating and just focus on females in science fiction and in real world science and sci-fi books and comics as well.
I love your podcast. It's so good to know that America still has somebody that's talking about, minorities and pride, and all of these things unashamedly. I mean, it's also a sci-fi, which doesn't hurt. But
yes, absolutely. And the great thing about science fiction is that there's always a real world message.
Yes.
There.
Always an allegory. So
Sci-Fi Queens, you said?
Yes.
On Instagram?
Yep. Sci-Fi Queen.
I have just liked you on Instagram.
Awesome.
I will follow you back.
I do recommend giving a watch, as I say, both John and listeners, the Sci-Fi Queens YouTube channel. Whenever they have episodes that go live, it's a fantastic watch. It really is. And
I will do that.
Sci-fi fan. So, yeah, and Nita's a very good host, as you can probably imagine from when she's on here. She's a great podcast host. She is. So there you go. So yeah, and thanks also to my other guest here, my emotional twin. I think when it comes to this movie and our particular thoughts on it, John, thank you. Thank you for coming and having the correct opinion about Citizen Kane.
Oh, okay. Good brother.
Thank you so much for embracing my, gushing about this. It could have got embarrassing if there wasn't somebody that shared my opinion. So thank you. And, did you have anything you wanted to plug or anywhere people can find you online?
Sure. John Adams here. I've got my Facebook page is John Adams / Phoenix Photography, where you can see a lot of my artwork. I also post a lot of my art on Instagram, and it's weird because it's under a different name. It's under Writer, WRITER 41.
Yes, I keep having to remind myself that's you whenever I see that you've commented.
I know. I've had it so long that I can't change it now. So that's how you can reach me. Thank you so much. This is a real thrill. It's always fun to do this. I'm losing my voice. But
some people would probably hope I did, but I didn't. I've still got mine. So, but no, before we move on, I have to say thank you again. I almost forgot for the fantastic artwork for this episode. You did the same for our Arsenic and Old Lace, and you've given us another gorgeous one for Citizen Kane, which I'm sure I will have used online on the social media, but I'll pop it up on screen as well here. This is my chance to remind myself to do that when I edit.
Thank you.
So good, honestly.
So I have a quick question for you, Michael. Is Citizen Kane your favorite classic?
Probably not. I can appreciate how, I love it, and it's certainly going to be in my list of top ones, but when it comes to my favorite classic, we're going to review it another time, so maybe I'll keep it to myself. Yeah. Awesome. It has truly been a joy for me here, obviously discussing one of the biggest films of all time, and as I said, one of my faves. But the podcasts keep coming. Starting in just over a week, our sister channel Hit or Miss Who Trek will begin its first full series of Doctor Who reviews, focusing on stories involving those menacing robotic pepper pots, the Daleks. And tying into that, next month's Cinema Classics sees us delving into the 1960s cinematic sequel, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. So until next time then, I've been Michael Wilson, filling the air with voices just like a certain news mogul we've come to know. And remember, no matter how big the headlines, it's the small things that stay with us. Good night, folks.
You have been listening to the Silver Screen Cinema Classics show, part of the Silver Screen podcast. Cinema Classics is hosted, produced, researched, scripted, and edited by Michael Wilson. Additional material by DK. Follow us on social media, our YouTube channel, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Links to all of these places can be found via the link tree in each episode's description. This podcast is a Media Matters original production created by Mike Wilson. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share far and wide. Join us again next time, and hopefully this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Here's looking at you, kid. Cut!